let's walk through the different ways you can set up calculators in your myiDecide presentations. To get started, we already have a few slides ready in the slides list for this tutorial. First, we'll show you how to assign values to buttons. Then we'll move on to setting up values for input fields. First, select the button you want to assign a value to. Then choose Actions from the context menu. Add an action to the button. We'll use Go to Slide for this example, and select the slide where you want the calculation to happen. At the bottom of the Actions panel, you'll see a toggle labeled Track Choice. Turn this on to reveal the fields where you can assign a value to your button. Next, give your value a name in the Choice Name field, so you can reference it later in your calculation. We'll use Customers. Then, in the Choice Value Type field, choose the type of value you want to store. For calculations, this must be set to number, currency, or percent for it to work correctly in your formulas. For this example, we'll select Number. This button is labeled 100 Customers, so we'll enter 100 in the Choice Value field to match. We're also setting up the 200, 300, and 400 buttons the same way, each using the same customer's choice name. This keeps all of their values stored under a single variable, which we'll reference later in our calculator formula. Now that our buttons have their values set, we'll head to the slide where we want the calculation to appear, using the slides list above. You can display a calculation in any text block in your presentation, and for this example, we already have a placeholder set up on the slide. Go ahead and select the text object where you want the result to show. Then choose Personalize from the context menu. In the text field, click to position your cursor where you want the calculation to appear. Then select Insert Calculation. This will add a set of curly brackets. Your formula will go inside these using familiar math formatting similar to Excel. To insert your stored value, first make sure your cursor is placed inside the curly brackets. Then open the Shortcodes menu above the text field and choose the name you defined in the previous step. This will insert your variable at the cursor position inside a set of square brackets. For this example, we'll use a simple formula that multiplies the selected number of customers by 2. Select the format you want to use for your result in the Calculation Output Type field. For this example, we'll choose Number to display a simple numeric output, and turn on the thousands separator so values are easier to read with commas. We'll leave rounding set to 0, so no decimal places are shown in the result. Now that our first calculator is set up, let's head over to the review step to test it and see the calculation in action. The selected button is now driving the presentation forward and multiplying our chosen value by 2. You can try each button to see the updated results by navigating back, or by restarting the presentation using the controls below. Now that we've confirmed our buttons are correctly storing values, let's update how the result is displayed. We'll click Edit Current Slide to return to the edit view for the slide with our calculation, then select the calculation text block again and open the Personalize menu. This time we'll change the rounding to 2 and set the output type to currency. This adds a $sign to the result and displays 2 decimal places, matching standard US currency formatting. Let's head back to the review step and take a look at the results. Now that we have the basics down for assigning values with buttons, let's move on to using an input field to store a user's answer, so we can use that value in a calculator. We'll head back to the slides list and select our pre-made slide to get started. To add an input field to your slide, click Form Fields in the left toolbar. For it to work in a calculator, choose a supported field type like Number Input or Currency Input. We'll go with Number Input, and make a few quick styling adjustments to better work for our layout. Once your field is added and styled the way you like, select it on the canvas, then click Options in the context menu above to start assigning a value to it. There are several options to customize how your input fields look and work, but for calculator functionality, only the input type and the variable name are required, just like assigning values to buttons. For the variable name, we'll use Customers2 to create a second variable that isn't connected to the one we set up earlier with our buttons, and will appear as a second option in the shortcodes list for use in a new calculation. If you want to change the input field type, use the Input Type dropdown. But remember, only properly formatted options like currency or number will work correctly in your calculations. Now that our input field is set up, we'll quickly create another slide to display the calculation, using the new Customers2 variable from the shortcodes list, just like we did earlier with our button calculation. And just like before, Any value entered into the input field is displayed multiplied by 2 on the slide containing our new formula. Now that we have both a button interaction and an input field tracking 2 separate interactions as separate variables, let's adjust our files one more time to use both variables together in a single calculation. You can edit your existing formulas by typing directly into the text boxes themselves, if you know the names of your stored interactions, or you can edit them from the personalization menu just as we did before. We've updated the presentation flow to show both inputs back-to-back before revealing the result, and returned to the review step to test it. As you can see, the calculator now adds both values together, then multiplies the total by 2, exactly as defined in the formula. And finally, if you want to store the result of a calculation, either to display later or use in another equation, you can select the text block with your formula and assign it a unique variable name. Just keep in mind, if you plan to reuse this variable in another calculation, it must be properly formatted and only include characters compatible with your equation. That's everything you need to get started building custom calculators in your myiDecide presentation. Stay tuned for more helpful tips and tricks.